Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods. First and foremost, my apologies. It took me quite a long time to record another episode. As you all know by now, I'm engaged in various other projects that I do prioritize, in all fairness, as of this moment in time. So sometimes that messes with my schedule regarding the recording, uploading, and editing of these episodes. I still aim to professionalize this channel this year after the ongoing projects I'm currently engaged in will be concluded and will be finalized. That will become my next priority. So I will be able to do that relatively quickly, relatively soon. And then obviously my schedule will become much more consistent regarding recording and uploading and disseminating content on this channel. So that being said, let's get into the topics of today. So there are basically two topics that I want to discuss on this episode. First is the ongoing situation in Gaza regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the other is more or less strategic assessment of some of the strategic goals, let's say, that Russian spring or summer advances will seek to achieve in the Ukrainian theater of war. So let's start with Gaza first and foremost. Obviously, the ceasefire is no longer in place. Surprise, surprise there. Hamas still to this very day refuses to release the appropriate number of hostages as they were urged to do according to the ceasefire that was in place at that specific point in time. And once again, as a result of that, Israel has ramped up its campaigns within the Gaza Strip once more, now with the sole aim of eradicating Hamas once and for all. What is important to note is that this time around, Israel's defense minister seems to be leans significantly more towards the extreme right, let's say, as its predecessor, obviously further complicating this conflict and its potential eventual resolution. So it doesn't look like the Israelis are going to stop anytime soon. They seem to be set on at least trying to retrieve the bodies of the remaining hostages. I believe there are around 58 or 59 hostages still in the hands of Hamas. So obviously Israel wants to get their bodies back, given the fact that probably most of them will no longer be alive, or are soon to be killed the moment Hamas feels the heat beneath its soles, let's say. So what does this mean for the future of Gaza? And let's say, what if Israel succeeds in eradicating Hamas? Then where do we go from there? Well, let me put it like this. And this is something that, in my opinion, was already the case even before 7 October 2023. In my opinion, Gaza has no hope. Hamas, for too long, has been able to delve its roots into Gaza society, into the civilian infrastructure, into every element of the Gaza Strip, to such a degree that it took away any notion of an existence without it. Gaza, as of right now, is tied towards Hamas, not just ideologically, not just culturally, but infrastructurally as well, economically as well, educationally as well. Everything that occurs within the Gaza Strip is at the whims of Hamas. And for too long, this international community, the geopolitical landscape, has stood idly by as Hamas expanded its totalitarian control over the Gaza Strip to such a degree that it cast aside all notions of hope. It becomes at the point now that even if Hamas disappears, what you're left with is a devastated piece of land, laying crumbled atop miles and miles of tunnels built solely for the purpose of smuggling and terrorist activity. It will be extremely difficult to build a thriving Palestinian society on top of that. Not just based sheerly upon the fact that Hamas has built extensive terrorist networks throughout the Gaza Strip, but solely because also there is so much trauma, so much hurt, so much devastation there, that it will be very hard for anything prosperous to bloom there. In my vision, Gaza is not a part of a future Palestinian state. I believe the future Palestinian state should revolve around the West Bank. I have very intricate, very profound plans and ideas and notions as to how a future Palestinian state should look. And perhaps I might share them with you all somewhere in the future. I won't do that in this clip, however. What I will say is this. So what if Hamas disappears? What then? Well, I'm very taken back by the fact that the Palestinian Authority has been relatively quiet throughout this entire conflict, throughout these latest rounds of fighting in particular. If there was ever a time for the Palestinian Authority to get one over on Hamas and to usher in a new direction that will lead towards a sustainable Palestinian state in the future, now would be that time. Hamas has been left more degraded than it has ever been in its existence. They're vulnerable. They continue to be vulnerable, especially given the ongoing Israeli campaigns against it. So if you're the Palestinian Authority, now is the time to set yourself apart. Now is the time to build your foundations from which you can usher in a new age in the future. Alas, they remain silent. And once they speak, it's often not to condemn Hamas, but more or less condone them, which will prove incredibly detrimental towards their own objectives, which allegedly are the formation of a sustainable Palestinian state in the future. So I would like to see significantly more involvement of the Palestinian Authority, louder voices, but ones different from Hamas. The time of Hamas is over, especially now with the Trump administration. Israel just has 4 years to do pretty much whatever they want in pursuit of the annihilation of Hamas. Hamas is done. And if certain actors, certain parties, opposing entities within the Palestinian society do not stand up in this moment in time, it might very well push the Palestinians themselves into an even greater abyss than the one they already find themselves in as of this moment in time. So what if Hamas disappears? Then what will happen? Well, if the Palestinian Authority themselves don't stand up, or don't have the capability to stand up and govern both the West Bank as well as Gaza, then it will fall upon the international community to take governance of Gaza. So what I believe will, either one of the following things will occur. One, Gaza will be transformed into a demilitarized zone, overseen by various actors within the international community. This might consist of the United States, NATO member states, Egypt, Israel, or a coalition of such. It might be attributed to the United Nations, although this is a notion that I'm incredibly against, given the fact that all the organization elements of the United Nations that have been active within Gaza over the past few decades have been incredibly corrupted and have faltered to an embarrassing extent. So I do not believe that the United States should be the part, or the United Nations rather, my apologies, should be the organization to take a lead role in this. Then obviously there's the Arab League. Perhaps they can step up. I believe they should step up. They should step up and to ensure that Gaza will not become another terrorist hub once again. That Hamas 2.0 or Hamas 3.0 will not have the ability and the freedom to resurface. However, will they be able to do that? Will they be able to take a neutral stance? Or will they condone other radical elements within Palestinian society as to keep the military and armed resistance against Israel alive? Then there is the other option, that is that either Israel or the United States take full control of the area. I'm not a keen fan of this, as it will further antagonize the Palestinians and other parties within the Middle East, increasing tensions in the mid and long term, making an eventual peace process that more arduous. However, these are the options that we're looking at. Ideally, Palestinians themselves, opposing entities within Palestinian political frameworks themselves, will stand up and will take a more assertive role in either the rebuilding of Gaza or the exodus from Gaza to an eventual sustainable Palestinian state within the West Bank, which eventually does need to occur. Palestinians themselves, the Palestinian Authority, will need to stand up, will need to rise up, will need to bolster its own ranks so that it eventually can take full control over the Palestinian societies, both in the West Bank as well as in the Gaza Strip. This, of course, is still quite problematic given the fact that the Palestinian Authority itself is all but stable, incredibly prone to corruption, and often, not in the least, at least based upon the rhetoric, partially sympathetic towards Hamas. So once again, the Palestinian people find themselves in an incredible predicament that it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. The fact of the matter remains that if a sustainable and prosperous Palestinian state is ever to come about, Hamas needs to be eradicated, to at least to the fullest extent possible, so that it no longer can exert influence in and throughout the Palestinian societies, both in Gaza as well as in the West Bank. Now, our next topic is the impending or, let's say, likely Russian advances that are going to occur this spring or this summer, and what they should revolve around. So obviously winter has passed, and just like prior years before, the Russians are set to advance once again. They have smelled proverbial blood, let's say, given the lenient stance of the Trump administration towards them. And they see a lot of room for opportunities, and they see a lot of room to solidify their hold on Ukrainian territory. So what they will try to do with these advances is to gain as much territory as possible before serious ceasefire negotiations or serious treaty negotiations are brought forth or are set to commence. So there are various areas where the Russians can focus on regarding their advances in the spring or in the summer. In my opinion, the two priorities strategically that they will hold above all else are their expansion within Sumy Oblast and their expansion within Zaporizhia. Why Sumy Oblast? Well, first and foremost, as of right now, Ukrainian troops are still present within Kursk Oblast. They still haven't been cast aside. They still haven't been cast out. So they're still present within Russian territory as a whole. So obviously Russia is quite, mildly concerned about that, given the fact that, it's a point of attention, right? Like, it just takes away and just diverts and just distracts from Russia's ongoing advancement deeper into Ukraine. So obviously, Russia will want to clear the playing field of any Ukrainian troops within their own territories. So by encircling them and by recapturing and solidifying their hold on Sumy Oblast, they can prevent Ukrainian forces from executing tactical retreats, as well as resupplying themselves to remain active within Kursk Oblast in the immediate future. So that will be one of the objectives, in my opinion, that Russian advances will seek to achieve. Then Zaporizhia, which in my opinion might be the most important one. Russia has previously stated that it wished to bring about a concept they refer to as Novo Russia or New Russia, and I've previously discussed this on this channel as well. So in their ideal reality, Novo Russia should incorporate East and Southern Ukraine as part of Russian territory. So obviously, given the fact that the Trump administration seems to be quite lenient regarding concessions that Russia needs to make and concessions that Ukraine needs to make, its position as of right now seems to be more lenient towards Russia than it has been to Ukraine thus far. The Russians see an opportunity, right? So what they will seek to do is conquer as much territory within southern Ukraine to solidify the notion of Novo Russia, so that potentially during ceasefire negotiations in the future, their claim to these lands is significantly stronger than it has been thus far. At the same time, Zaporizhia is of incredibly strategic importance to them as well. It's one of the main strongholds that stands between them and central Ukraine, and as well as the fulfillment, let's say, of the borders of Novo Russia. If they wish to bring about Novo Russia, Zaporizhia is essential in that regard. Zaporizhia will allow them control and to allow them to solidify their control within southern Ukraine, giving them access to central Ukraine, as well as bringing them closer to the borders of Moldova, which I previously explained on another episode in this channel, is one of the Kremlin's future objectives in relation to expanding their territory back towards former Soviet member states. So, obviously, those two will prove to be the most strategically significant for the Russians. But the fact of the matter remains is that the Western world needs to pose a strong front against them, not just militarily, but also politically. As of right now, the Russians seem eager to engage in diplomatic talks, not because they want a swift resolution to the war in Ukraine, but because they want to gain as much as possible. They want to gain as much momentum. They want to gain as much concessions from the other party before they put their signature beneath any official treaty or agreement. They believe that the Trump administration will allow them this leniency, will allow them to expand their control over Ukraine, and not just that, but will eventually acknowledge their control over these parts of Ukraine, if only to come to a swift resolution of this war. The Russians smell blood. The Russians deem the Western world to be more feeble and more susceptible to manipulation, much more than it has been in the years leading up to these events. And once again, this is partly due to the Trump administration's rhetoric thus far. Now, whether that rhetoric will change depends on a multitude of factors. It depends upon the ongoing US-Ukrainian mineral deal. It depends upon obviously the advisors around President Trump and his administration. It will depend upon Russia's posture and how that will be received and perceived by President Trump. So there's a lot of uncertainty still going on here. As of strategic objectives on the ground, these, in my opinion, are two of the main strategic objectives that the Russian military will seek to achieve in the spring and or summer of 2025. Because this will allow them This will allow them to repel ongoing Ukrainian incursions into Kursk, as well as expand their stronghold of eastern Ukraine onto southern Ukraine, and provide them better access to the Black Sea as well, but also better access into central Ukraine, and eventually bring them closer to the borders of Moldova, which obviously will align with the future notion, with the future territory of Novorussia, as the Kremlin has previously outlined. So these are just my ideas about what is going to happen in the coming months. If you have any comments for me, if you have any questions for me, or any suggestions as to the topics you'd like me to discuss next, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. You can also reach out to me on one of my other social media platforms, and I aim to get back at you as swiftly as possible. I thank you very much for listening to this clip. Like I said, I'm currently engaged in a lot of other projects that I hope will be finalized pretty soon. And then at that point in time, I will focus more of my attention towards this channel and really aim to professionalize it more and disseminate more content on a more consistent schedule, let's say. So once again, thank you for your time and stay tuned.